The Religion of the Aryo-Germanic Folk by Guido Von List is a book which was published in 1910 and functions as a companion to his magnum opus, The Secret of the Runes. In it, Guido Von List covers an array of subjects pertaining to Armanist doctrines and the folk religion, or Wihinei, of the ancient Aryans. For over a century, the book has been locked to the German-speaking world, but thanks to a translation by the renowned rune scholar Dr. Stephen Flowers, it can now be read by English speakers. This book is peculiar in that within one paragraph, Guido Von List might say something extremely profound, and in the next, he might say something patently ludicrous. At numerous points, I found myself awestruck by what I was reading. Some passages deeply resonated with me on a spiritual level, while in other passages, Von List makes rather absurd claims. Critics of Von List like to point to his more outlandish statements and dismiss him whole cloth as a crackpot. However, by doing this, they throw the baby out with the bathwater, for Guido Von List does have much esoteric wisdom to offer. As such, the book is best approached whilst practicing discernment. A prudent reader will glean the useful contents of the book and discard the rest. The first and most important concept for readers to grasp is that of the ancient Aryan Wihinei. Wihinei can be understood as the folk religion of the ancient Germanics, but this description does not encapsulate the full meaning of the term. Guido Von List is clear that in addition to being what we might call a religion, Wihinei is a spiritual language written into the hearts of every Aryan. It is not a codified set of dogmas, but rather an innate and incommunicable knowledge granted to each Aryan by divine powers. It points us in the direction of what is good and pleasing to the gods, and yet because it is incommunicable, it also must be sought after and realized by each individual Aryan for himself. Von List writes that millennia ago, the Wihinei was common knowledge to our people, but over time this idyllic state of affairs changed. The Wihinei was not lost to us due to it being written into our souls, but it was obscured from us such that we must now connect with it within ourselves. Von List also says that as our folk drifted away from that holy primeval state of being, the Wihinei split into two interpretations. The esoteric interpretation of the Wihinei was preserved through the doctrines of Armanism by the Armanen masters and by the Hohe Heimlich Acht, which Flowers translates as the High Secret Tribunal. The exoteric interpretation of the Wihinei was preserved through the religion of Wotanism, which allowed for the broader populations to realize the Wihinei within themselves. Although he states that Wihinei is incommunicable, Von List does attempt to summarize some of its teachings for the benefit of the reader. On page 50, he gives 10 such teachings. These are: 1. Recognize God in thyself, and man in thy essence. Work for the recognition of this through word and example for others, but do not force this recognition onto others. 2. Recognize the all-one self in thyself and thy fellow men. Deal with others as thou wishest they would want to deal with thee. 3. Do not neglect thy spirit for thy sake of thy body, nor thy body for the sake of thy spirit. Thus thou shalt always remain in balance, in that each of these supports the other, and the God within thee holds the guiding hand. 4. Always listen to and follow thy inner voice, and do what it advises thee to do. And thus wilt thou always know what thou hast to do, and thou wilt strive toward the good and avoid evil. 5. Let not thy heart vacillate, and trust in the God within more than the advice of strangers, for thou alone canst know what guides thee toward salvation, for thou art thine own judge. 6. Recognize thy duties as a human being to aid other selves towards rebirth, as thy parents helped thee to rebirth. Facilitate these reincarnated selves in thy children as much as possible, that they may reach their goals through good upbringing and education, and avoid misusing or squandering the creative force entrusted to thee. 7. Recognize that thou hast been born into a ring, be this ring the family, community, folk, state, etc., in order to work for the benefit of this ring. Fulfill this duty in complete devotion, but also demand the rights guaranteed to thee, so that the balance will never be disturbed. 8. Respect the law and contracts. Always be truthful and without guile. 9. Preserve thy dignity as a human being in small things and great. Always be calm, cheerful, and joyous. Bear with patience and dignity the suffering that is placed on thee, and be not arrogant in times of luck. Enjoy whatever pleasures life offers thee, for enjoyment is thy right. But steadfastly renounce whatever withholds it from thee, because it is occasioned by thy self-created Garma, by means of thy own will. 10. Let the God in thee govern. Be strict with thyself, though not in an ascetic manner, but be kind to others without weakness, and await death in quiet dignity, as thy friend who is kindly bringing thee to thy further evolution, perfection, and happiness thou hast been striving for. In addition to Wihinei, another salient concept to study is that which Guido Von List calls Garma. Garma is very similar to the Hindu concept of karma, with the main difference being that Guido Von List uses a G instead of a K. Every soul exists in a garmic chain, or chain of causality, which is a product of one's own choices. Following one's conscience generates good Garma, while working against one's conscience creates bad Garma. Good Garma will reward the doer either in this life or in another, while bad Garma will result in penalties for the doer in their current life or in a future reincarnation. This neatly segues us into the next concept worthy of mention, which is the Aryo-Germanic view on reincarnation. Throughout the book, Guido Von List repeats over and over that everything, including human souls, are in an eternal cycle of arising, being, and passing away to a new arising. This cycle of arising, being, and passing away to a new arising is sometimes referred to as the triphytic triune triad, which I discussed in my review of The Secret of the Runes. As a result of this principle, in the view of the ancient Germanic Aryans, death is not something to be feared. It is a state of transition, not a terminus, and the soul will return as a new personality after briefly returning to the Urstand, which Flowers translates as being the primeval condition. This time spent in the Urstand before experiencing reincarnation is either pleasant or torturous, according to the person's Garma. Positive Garma allows for the soul to travel to Vanaheim, Alfheim, or Asaheim, according to Guido Von List. Negative Garma, however, causes the soul to go to less desirable realms on the world tree Yggdrasil. These souls will experience pain and regret in Jotunheim, Svartalfheim, or Helheim, until they are finally reincarnated, according to Guido Von List. The worst souls, however, go to the lowest realm of Niflheim, and are devoured there by the serpentine dragon Nidhogg. For these souls, reincarnation cannot happen. They are doomed to suffer until the end of space and time, when the world tree Yggdrasil dies, and all matter is returned to that primeval condition of Urstand. Only then can their suffering end. Some practitioners of Asatru or other forms of paganism might object to the specifics of reincarnation as outlined by Guido Von List. As an Asatrar myself, I must broach a contention with Von List which is germane to the subject. In the book, Guido Von List views the primeval condition, or Urstand, as being anthropomorphized as Surtur. Surtur, as any Germanic pagan will know, is the fire giant of Muspelheim, who is prophesied to kill Freyr and destroy Asgard in Ragnarok. Guido Von List claims that Surtur is a good being and is the first Logos, as well as being the Allfather. In fact, Guido Von List regards Surtur as being higher than the god Odin. I should not need to elaborate why this is wrong, but nevertheless, it is important to mention here. We will revisit this topic in the criticism section of the video. Returning now to our analysis, it is worth examining what Von List writes regarding sex as it pertains to the religion of the ancient Germanic folk. Today, Christians falsely claim that before Europe was Christianized, the pagans engaged in all kinds of degenerate sexual acts on a constant basis. According to these people, many of whom sadly claim to be right-wing, it was only due to the imposition of Christianity that European sexual mores became right and proper. While this myth is convenient for the zealous Christians, unfortunately for them, it is also inaccurate. Von List addresses pagan sexual mores on multiple occasions throughout the book, beginning on page 11. On page 11, Von List mentions the Good Seven, who are the 7 goddesses of love who serve Freya. To quote Von List, they, the goddesses, are ordered as follows. Gephion, she who gives, a virgin in fresh bloom. She gifts the children when they come into bloom as virgins, with the honeydew of their pleasing essences, which have the power to coerce a man into love, and she also gathers all those into her entourage who die while still virgins, so that they can be escorted by her to new luck in love with renewed charms in their next reincarnation. Snotra is gifted with feminine grace and the charm of eloquent speech. She is the messenger of love in service to Freya, in that she puts thoughts of love into the hearts of lovers desired by others, and shows them dream images of those who love them while they sleep. Siofna fans Snotra's spark of love into a blazing flame, in which the hearts of lovers are melded into one, or if kept apart, each will wither. Loba moves the maiden to give her chosen one the ring of Loba, an engagement ring, under Loba's protection. Vara protects with flaming runes the oaths of fidelity in the hearts of lovers, and avenges the violation of these oaths. Sina, who is prudent, guards the lock on the door of the bridal chamber, and avenges the crime of unallowed sexual pleasure. It is also she who opens the bridal chamber for the seventh, the Sunny, for Lady Fenna, or Fane, the generative birth-giving one. With her, all of the joys of love and marriage enter into life, and none is more modest in this regard than Freya herself, our chaste Aryo-Germanic Venus Genetrix. Hence we see that the Aryo-Germanic peoples venerated goddesses who are noble, chaste, and generative. Importantly, these goddesses cultivated sexual virtue among the ancient Aryans, to whom the veneration of women and strict marriage laws were sacrosanct. Having now rebuffed the ugly Christian lie that the ancient Germanics were sexual degenerates, we come to the end of the analysis portion of the video. To recap, we have discussed the Wihinei, the distinction between Armanism and Wotanism, the Hohe Heimlich Act, the concept of Garma, the cycle of arising, being, and passing away to a new arising, reincarnation, and the perception of sex by the Aryo-Germanics. These are by no means the only subjects that Von List writes about, however they are in my opinion the most noteworthy. With these subjects addressed, we may now move on to criticisms of the book. Recall how I said in one paragraph, Guido Von List might say something extremely profound, and in another, he might say something patently ludicrous. Unfortunately, this otherwise great book is sullied by several things which I would be remiss to not address. The first of these things is Guido Von List's projection of theosophical ideas onto the religion of the ancient Aryo-Germanics. Theosophy is a school of occultism created by the Jewess Helena Blavatsky. It is responsible for manifold discredited ideas, not least of which is that of the 7 root races. Even if one puts Madame Blavatsky's ethnicity aside, the concept of the 7 root races and theosophy as a school of thought more broadly are in my mind subversive, unscientific, and wildly inaccurate. Unfortunately, Guido Von List does seem to buy into theosophical influences, and as a result, he projects beliefs onto the ancient Germanics which they themselves did not hold. The most egregious example of this is the claim that the Aryan race, which is the 5th root race in Blavatsky's theosophical system, came from the moon originally and then settled in Hyperborea. I do not need to explain why this statement is ludicrous, and I will not insult the intelligence of my viewers by lingering any longer on this point. The second glaring flaw in this otherwise tremendous book is Guido Von List's metaphysics as it pertains to the giant Surtur. This was briefly dealt with in the analysis of the book, but to elaborate, Guido Von List views the gods as existing on a gradient in terms of their divinity. At the top of this gradient is not Odin, but rather Surtur, who Von List believes is a personification of the Urstand, or the primeval condition. Von List believes that Odin is not a separate deity from the giant Surtur, but rather he is a manifestation of Surtur on another level on the gradient. Both are manifestations of the one divine god essence, the Allfather, but they are not the same personification of this essence. As a pagan myself, this idea is like nails on a chalkboard to my ears. In Asatru, we do not believe this to be correct, and I reject this idea on religious grounds. With that said, however, I would like to put aside my own criticisms of this idea and address it from the perspective of a historian asking, what did the Proto-Germanics actually believe? While little textual evidence of the ancient Germanic religion exists, What we do know from sources like Snorri Sturluson's Poetic Edda and the Roman historian Tacitus, who wrote Germania, these sources indicate that this was not an idea rooted in historical fact. On the contrary, Von List appears to have developed this idea on his own and then projected it onto the ancient Aryan Germanic peoples. No literary or archaeological evidence indicates that Surtur was the manifestation of the Urstand, and for all of the aforementioned reasons, I reject Guido Von List's claims on this topic in his book. The final major criticism has to do with folk etymology, or the practice of trying to discover the origin of words by drawing connections between words based on how they might sound alike. Stephen Flowers notes that this practice predates Guido von List, and that von List's methodology bears remarkable similarity to Indian mystics who analyze Sanskrit words in the same way. Throughout the book, von List frequently employs folk etymology to deduce the esoteric meanings of Norse words. I find this practice to be too subjective to take seriously, and critique it on the grounds that linguists and archaeologists overwhelmingly see the practice as a substandard way to analyze words. In conclusion, The Religion of the Aryo-Germanic Folk by Guido von List is a profound work of occult literature that is periodically marred by dubious claims. Despite the obvious warts, it is still my opinion that the book holds great value for which any scholar of the esoteric may benefit. I do not agree with the critics who uncharitably dismiss von List as a crackpot, and by the same token, I do not agree with practitioners of Armanism who point to List as the greatest authority on Aryan paganism. As for whether I recommend the book, I find that the book resonated with me spiritually, and I recommend it to curious scholars fascinated by Germanic mysticism. However, if one is not inclined to study the esoteric or mystical matters, this book should be a pass, and you will benefit more from reading something of a political character.